Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What is an unsolved mystery that still fascinates you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. The Isdal woman. She was a foreign woman found burned to death at a remote area in Norway in 1970. She visited Norway twice in 1970, once in March of 70, and then in November of 70. The Isdal woman stayed at various hotels around Norway under several false names, and supposedly possessed false passports. Hotel staff reported that she kept to herself and spoke to them in German and broken English. She was also witnessed conversing in French with a man in a hotel lobby. The Isdal woman stood out in Norway because she looked foreign and dressed very stylishly. She was also a lone woman staying in hotels, which was unusual in 1970. After her death, it was rumored that she was a spy from Israel or Russia. Nobody knows who she is and why she came to Norway. Her death was ruled as a suicide, though many investigators dispute this ruling. The disappearance of Cherrie Mahan. She got off her school bus 50 feet from her house and was never seen again. Recently, some woman came forward claiming to be her, but was proven not to be her. The lead masks case is pretty weird. Two young radio technicians from Rio de Janeiro were found dead on a hillside one summer day. They were dressed in business suits and raincoats despite the hot August weather, and they were both wearing eye masks cut from sheets of lead. There was a small notebook near them with the instructions 1630 Estarno local determinado, 1830 Ingerir capucelas apos efito protegar metias aguadar sinal mascara, 1630 be at the specific location, 1830 ingest capsules. After the effect, protect metals, await signal mask. Nobody seems to know what that means or why the men did what they did. The Dardeen family homicides. It doesn't fascinate me so much as it has left me horrified for years since initially learning about it. In 1987, a family of 3, soon to be 4, were living in Ina, Illinois. Keith, Elaine, who was heavily pregnant at the time, and their young son, Peter. More than 10 murders had been committed in the last 2 years before the family's death. Keith was actively looking to move his family to a safer area. Unfortunately, they never got the chance. One night, some sick F came into their house, no sign of forced entry, even though Keith was very careful about who came into the home around his family, especially at night, and beat Elaine so badly she went into labor. Then the perpetrator beat the newborn little girl, who was to be called Casey, to death. Peter was beaten to death as well. The beatings were done with a baseball bat little Peter had received as a present earlier in the year. The killer then laid all 3 of them together in a bed. Keith was taken from the scene alive in his own vehicle, which was later found at a police station. He was found the next day dead in a field, shot 3 times with his penis removed. Sneha Phillips. Woman goes missing about the same time 9/11 happens. She lived just 2 blocks away from the tower, so she probably died, right? Well, it didn't take long for investigators to uncover some shady things about her. Apparently, she had been living a double life. She was going to seedy lesbian bars and going home with women. She also had a bit of a drinking problem as well. Her husband and her family vehemently deny this, though. Her husband says she was going to lesbian bars with women because she was SA'd by a co-worker at a bar and didn't feel comfortable around men. I'll let you decide if he's telling the truth or not. Another thing of note, she was seen on CCTV at a mall with a still unidentified woman. They were shopping together, and she bought a pair of lingerie. Her credit card history backs this up. There was extremely shitty security cam footage of a woman kind of matching her description in the lobby of her building at the time the tower was hit. She suddenly takes off at a certain point. However, it's never been confirmed if this is her or not. So what happened to her? Did she run away with a lover for life with less dude in it? Was she killed in 9/11 attacks? Did someone more sinister happen to her? Who was the woman that she was seen on the CCTV footage with the day she disappeared? Is her family lying, or is the police? Was she the woman on the lobby footage? I feel like a couple of years ago with this topic, this woman's story came up, and I was like, oh, I'm going to look into this. And then life happened, and I forgot. Now I was just reminded. So as soon as I finish this, I'm going to look into it. So thanks for reminding me. Tragic that it probably is. In early 1945, a Boston hospital received an unconscious patient suffering serious injuries, including infected shrapnel wounds. The hospital was taking in injured seamen from several U.S. ships, and no one bothered asking questions as they started treatment, but someone wrote on a card, Charles A. Jamison. Some articles say, Jamison, 49, religion Catholic, American, Cutty Sark. After extensive treatment, Jamison slowly improved to the point he could speak. Unfortunately, he seemed to be suffering amnesia, and what little information he could give couldn't be matched to any records. There was no U.S. enlisted man named Charles Jamison or any variation who was unaccounted for. The patient's fingerprints and photos were checked against military and criminal records with no match. No ship named Cutty Sark was listed in the U.S. military. There was one used by the British Navy. This seemed promising, as among Jamison's distinctive tattoos was one with the U.S. and British flags, and he recalled living in London and training at a British gunnery school. But the British vice consul, who felt Jamison spoke with a British accent, sent his information to the Admiralty and the British Maritime Registry, who couldn't match it to any sailor. Despite record searches in both the US and the UK, and widespread newspaper coverage, no one was ever able to figure out who Charles Jamison was. He spent 30 years in the hospital before he died with no solid identity. Tamam Shud, or Somerton Man, just really bizarre and creepy. It's got an X-Files vibe to it. Well-dressed athletic guys found dead leaning against a seawall on an Australian beach. No cause of death is discovered despite autopsy. No ID, no labels on any kind of his clothes, nothing to identify him, but a scrap of printed paper saying Taman Shud found in his pocket. No one is reported missing. Later, a briefcase is found in a locker at a train station attributed to him with a few clothes marked T. Keen. No one named that is found missing. When the info about the note is released, one of the locals finds an odd book in the back seat of his car in the area that the man died. The piece of paper matches the torn-out bit in the book. In the book, there's a very odd cipher that no one has been able to decode since, and a phone number. Blood pooling in the body suggests he didn't die with his head propped against a wall as he was found. Half-smoked cigarette found fallen out of his mouth, but if he died in a different position, would be a little odd. Body was embalmed and put on display for 6 months, and received a lot of attention, but no one can remember having seen him. No family or anyone knowing him have ever been found. Taman Shud roughly means the end times. Bryce Laspisa went missing after an hours-long ordeal in which he was frequently in contact with his parents via phone, but continued to make no or little progress toward his destination with no particular justification. His parents even asked a local person to help him get onto the highway, etc., which he did, but he continued to make no meaningful progress. He never made it home, and his vehicle was eventually found, having experienced some kind of accident. I think some blood present, but not a huge amount. The car was near a body of water. He was not in the vehicle and has never been located. Evidence suggests to me that he was having some kind of mental health episode or possibly issues with drugs impacting decision making, maybe disassociating for the trip and eventually died by suicide, but in a way that made him hard to find, or tried to disappear into society, but he's such a distinctive looking guy that it's really hard to believe no one would have seen him. This one just drives me nuts, because he really went missing while everyone was very actively trying to keep tabs on him, and even speaking to him intermittently. It doesn't feel like a situation that should have loose ends. The case of Brian Shaffer still boggles me to this day. He was last seen on camera entering a bar. There are no other exits he could have used without being seen. A camera or witness would have caught him. It's possible Shaffer had a change of clothes so no one would recognize him, but if I recall correctly, that theory has since been thrown out. His car was still parked near his apartment, and weirdly enough, his cell phone last pinged a few miles outside the city. As far as his loved ones knew, Shaffer had no reason to suddenly leave, and any potential leads thus far have unfortunately been dead ends. Shaffer quite literally vanished. He entered the bar and never left. I think the general consensus is unfortunately foul play, and some believe his body is in the very building he went into, but I think that has already been looked into and nothing came up. The death of Magdalena Zuk. She was a Polish girl who bought tickets for both herself and her boyfriend to go to Egypt, but ended up going alone due to issues with her boyfriend's passport or visa. Just a day after she arrived in Egypt, she seemingly lost her mind. She started acting strange and was taken to a private hospital while arrangements were made for her boyfriend's friend to come take her back to Poland. At the hospital, she made multiple attempts to jump out of the window and had to be restrained. A nurse untied her so that she could go to the bathroom, and apparently Magda made a final fatal dash for the window. She was taken to a larger hospital but died hours later. You can find recordings of her video call with her boyfriend, which clearly shows her being paranoid and jumpy. When asked what the problem was, besides phrases like, "They have all sorts of tricks here," and "I'll never get out of here," all she said was one letter, M. Her boyfriend's name started with M. Her tour guide's name started with M. The name of the friend who was being sent to her also started with M, if I remember correctly. So there really is no way to know what the whole thing was about. She also said something along the lines of, "They're watching me. I can't talk." What made Magda act strangely? Why was she so scared? Why did she jump out of a window? Did she even jump out of a window on her own accord? Was she pushed off? Another girl, who was associated with her boyfriend, also died under suspicious circumstances, but I couldn't find much more on that in English. Diane Augat, Florida woman, went missing from her home, and the tip of her severed finger was found 4 days later around the area she was last seen. Her mother received a frantic phone call from Diane, which went to the answering machine. Diane can be heard saying, "Help, help, let me out," and then, "Hey, give me that," amid noises consistent with someone trying to grab the phone out of her hand. The number belonged to a local business called Starlight, but no one picked up when the mother called the number back, and there's not a lot of information on how closely it was looked into. 2 weeks after she was reported missing, a bag of her clothes turned up at a local gas station. Around 2 years later, after a newspaper article about her disappearance was published, another bag labeled Diane was found with items her mother say belonged to her. What muddles things further is that Diane was diagnosed bipolar and had been Baker acted multiple times in the past, as well as arrested for minor crimes. She had recently been released from a mental facility before going missing. It would be easy to write this off as a mentally unstable woman wanders off, but how did her severed finger end up on the street? Who left her clothing at the gas station? Who was she with when she made that call? It's a super creepy disappearance. David Glenn Lewis is one of the fascinating ones where we have some semblance of a beginning and found out about how things ended much later, yet still nothing seems to make sense, and we're left with an incredible amount of questions. While his family is away on a shopping trip, he's reportedly seen acting somewhat strange during Super Bowl weekend of 1993 in Dumas, Texas, where he lived. On the day of the Super Bowl, he's still reportedly seen in Dumas in the morning. He disappears, and though his abandoned vehicle is found close to home, and some evidence that he may have boarded a plane to Dallas or Los Angeles is found, but ultimately he never shows up. There's some suspicious financial activity and some supposed sightings, but the case of David Glenn Lewis goes cold, and his family is left without answers. Skip forward 11 years, and a detective in the state of Washington is trying to solve some long-term missing person or John Jane Doe cases with the help of some newer technology available. One of the cases he was investigating was that of the Moxie John Doe, a man who was found walking down the middle of a highway near Moxie, Washington, in the middle of the night on February 1st, 1993. The man was struck by a vehicle in a hit and run and pronounced dead at the scene. The vehicle was never identified, and it took 11 years to finally find the identity of the Doe. As you can probably connect, that Doe was David Glenn Lewis. And though the answer of his fate had been discovered, it leads to many new questions. Why did he make the 1,600-mile trip to an area he had no known connection to? How did he even manage to make such a trip? He was supposedly seen the same day in his hometown, which leaves some serious logistical questions as to how he got so far in such a short amount of time, leaving next to no trail. Why was David Glenn Lewis wandering down the middle of the highway, dressed in clothes very unusual for him, in the middle of the night, in a supposedly unfamiliar area? There are numerous theories related to possible foul play, possibly related to his work as an attorney, and of course, the possibility that he had some sort of mental breakdown and disappeared voluntarily. But nothing seems to fit in perfectly, and every theory leaves a few questions still unanswered. A really interesting case, and one that there's numerous breakdowns with more detail than I've put here. The Fort Worth Missing Trio. On December 23, 1974, 3 girls vanished from Fort Worth, Texas. The girls, Mary Rachel Trilka, aged 17, preferred name Rachel, Lisa Renee Wilson, preferred name Renee, aged 14, and Julianne Mosley, aged 9, planned to go to the local shopping mall to do some Christmas shopping. The original plan was for the 2 older girls to go on their own. However, little Julie begged the girls and her mother to tag along, as she did not want to be alone all day and had no one else to play with. Julie's mother was at first hesitant, but relented with the rule that she be back by 4 p.m. The older girls gladly agreed, as they had a party to attend that evening. The trio piled into Renee's car, first stopping at the Army-Navy store in Fort Worth to collect some items yet on layaway. They then traveled to the Seminary South Shopping Center in South Fort Worth, Texas. Several witnesses state that they saw all 3 girls at the shopping center together that day, confirming they did at some point enter the building. As 4 p.m. ticked by and the girls did not return home, the families of the girls grew concerned. They split up, some staying home in the event the girls returned, and others heading to the shopping center to search for them. Rachel's car was located on the upper level of the Sears parking garage. Inside were bags of items the girls had purchased, indicating they did return to the car at least once, but the girls were nowhere to be found. Police were involved quickly, however. The Fort Worth Police Department determined the trio were runaways, despite all 3 families stating this was not likely. All 3 were happy in their homes with good family connections. Young Julie was excited for Christmas, and both older girls had plans to attend a Christmas party they were very excited about. Rachel was a newlywed, enjoying time with her new husband, who appeared very happy. The case was handed over to the Youth Division of the Missing Persons Bureau, where investigations continued into disappearances. Exactly one day after the girls failed to return home, Rachel's husband received this letter. "I know I'm going to catch it, but we had to get away. We're going to Houston. See you in about a week. The car is in Sears. Upper lot. Love, Rachel." It's important to note that the letter was written in ink while the envelope in pencil. The paper it was written on was larger than the envelope, and the letter was addressed to Thomas A. Trelica, whereas Rachel always referred to her husband as Tommy, not Thomas. Rachel's name in the letter was originally misspelled and corrected by going back over the errors in ink. The letter's postage did not contain a city, but did contain a blurry zip code. There is much debate on what zip code is written, but leading theories all lead to locations within Texas. The latter has been examined by handwriting experts 3 times so far, but has been determined to be inconclusive each time. The families of the missing girls do not believe this letter to be written by Rachel. The families refused to give up hope and distributed flyers for the missing girls, as well as placing ads in newspapers seeking information on the whereabouts of the trio. In 1975, a waitress came forward. A young man who claimed to be an acquaintance of Rachel's claimed he saw the trio inside a record store, where they had a brief conversation. He stated an unknown person was with the girls inside the store. Around this time, women's clothing was discovered in Justin, Texas. However, it was later determined that the clothing did not belong to the trio. In spring of that year, the families, frustrated by the police and lack of answers, hired their own private detective, John Swaim. In August that same year, John Swaim discovered that a 28-year-old man, who had worked for a store Rachel applied at shortly before her disappearance, had been taking phone numbers of local women from their store applications and harassing them via phone. 6 women who had applied for a job at that store received lewd and obscene phone calls from the man. The same man briefly lived by Rachel's parents and moved shortly before Rachel married. Despite this information, nothing ever came of this new suspect. The following April, the private detective took 100 volunteers to search under bridges in Port Lavaca for the girls' bodies after he received a tip that they may have been abducted and killed in the area. Despite their efforts, no trace of the girls were found. 1 year later, the skeletons of 3 individuals were found in a field outside Alvord, Texas, by a local oil drilling crew. The private detective had the skeletons checked against dental records and x-rays of the missing girls. However, it was determined the bones belonged to 1 male and 2 female individuals between 15 and 17 years of age. By March of 1976, the families were contacted by a psychic claiming the girls' bodies would be found near an oil drill. Search efforts were focused in on the small town of Rising Star, but once again, the girls were nowhere to be found. 3 years tickled by with no major breaks in the case, and in 1979, private detective John Swaim committed suicide via drug overdose. Upon his death, he ordered all of his case files pertaining to the missing trio to be destroyed. Hope was renewed in 1981 when investigators were called to a swamp in Brazoria County after human remains were located. It took a month of investigating and was determined that the remains in the swamp were not that of the missing trio. The same year, an alleged witness came forward stating they saw a man forcing 3 girls into a yellow pickup truck the night the girls vanished near the mall. However, this claim could never be verified. Another alleged witness came forward shortly after claiming to have seen a man forcing a girl into a white van on the same day the girls disappeared. The man allegedly told the witness it was a family dispute and to stay out of it. However, this claim could not be verified. In 2001, the case was reopened and assigned to homicide detective Tom Bocher. His leading theory was that the girls left willingly with a person they knew and trusted, and that more than one individual was involved in their disappearance. This claim was never verified. Shortly after the case was reopened, a former security guard at the mall came forward stating he had a verbal argument with another guard who apparently had 3 girls in his truck the night the trio vanished. The girls were laughing and appeared to be there willingly. This claim was never verified and highly disputed. The last update in the case came in 2018 when 2 vehicles were pulled from the Benbrook Lake as they were believed to be connected to the missing girls. The vehicles unfortunately yielded no answers or obvious connections to the missing trio. It has been 45 years since the girls disappeared. They are presumed dead. What happened to the Fort Worth missing trio?